Hi guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws with another exclusive interview for the 45th anniversary of Jaws 2. Yes, you guessed it. The man on the screen is Jeffrey Kramer, aka Deputy Hendricks, from not just Jaws, but also Jaws 2. Jeffrey, welcome to the Daily Jaws. It's great to see you.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here at my favorite Daily Jaws. And you, Ross, who I give great credit. You went and did this and now do it full time, and you can see it. It's so well done. Big
Thank you.
kudos.
Thank you, Jeff. That's such a kind of thing. I also have to say shout out to Dean, who is working on the content almost sort of around the clock and also
Ah,
around his job too,
my bad. My
and to all of the guest writers as well that do help. But thank you. We love keeping the legacy of Jaws alive. But anyway, we're here to talk about Jaws 2, and it's the 45th anniversary. So, first question is the obvious one: can you believe it's 45 years since Jaws 2 came out?
Well, I was only 9 when we made the movie, so I get it. It is stunning to me that it is 45 years. I mean, how did it go so quickly? And it seems to be that Jaws is more loved and widely viewed now than ever before.
I think you're right. And I think it's since the birth of social media, people have now got ways to
Oh, big time.
express and share their love. And, we see it all the time on the Daily Jaws, but also the other great Facebook groups and social media stuff out there about Jaws too. So I think that plays a massive, massive part. And I think a lot of films are getting resurgences, but Jaws, it's always going to be just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Oh, for
It,
sure. It makes me happy. I love it.
oh, people love Hendrix. You've even got a comic book dedicated to you. So,
I
you're
know. I love this graphic novel. I wrote the foreword to the second edition.
I read it. I've got a copy of it. I think it's
Oh,
absolutely,
good.
absolutely fantastic. I think I even get a cameo in there with my name in there, believe it or not. But anyway,
That's
anyway,
very cool.
we digress. So, when it came to Jaws 2, how did you first hear that the movie was happening, and how did you end up getting your role as
Well,
Hendrix?
I heard that they were going to do it. I was contacted by Universal. They got my agent and they hired me. And I went to Florida to go do this movie. And when I showed up, there was another director, a guy named John Hancock was doing it. And when I showed up, he had cut my part into two, hired his friend, who I thought was a nice man, but very different than I was, a kind of a character actor, quite wide. And he gave him all the funny lines. And I said, this isn't what I signed up for. When I think of it now, I think, oh my God, was I nuts? At least it was a job and we didn't have any money then. And I left. And then several weeks later, I got a call. Evidently, he had been fired. They must have really hated that kind of footage to write off all that pre-production and everything else. And Jean Swark and Joe Alves, I'm sure, said, hey, wait, we like the guy who did the original and come back. And I did. And I was glad that I did. I have lifelong friends from this.
Well, we've spoken to some of the other cast members, and they've all said the same thing. In terms of the relationships and the friendships that were formed on the movie. Where I heard a fantastic story from Billy Van Sant when I talked to him yesterday, and he said that a couple of people from Jaws 2 are thinking about getting together for a dinner because they just happen to be in town together.
We did. We had them all at my house. We did a show a year ago, and everybody came over, and I had a little party at the house. Even David Elliott came, and it was lovely.
Oh,
It was so much fun. It was such an experience. It was so long. It was 9 months. I
mm.
mean, marriages of 20 years broke up on this movie. It was 9 months is an extraordinarily long time to be
Yeah.
on a location. And particularly people with kids, you have a tough time with that. You can't take them out of school when they're a little older.
Mm.
But it was kind of bondage under fire, because we'd sometimes go days without shooting anything. The weather would happen, the boats would drift, and you'd have to reset them. They had 3 units on the water shooting simultaneously sometimes, and it was a logistical nightmare. I mean, my hat really goes off to Jean Oswart, who I think is truly brilliant, that he came in with no prep
Mm.
and redid a script that didn't work, helped change it. Carl was there, and ended up with one of the better sequels ever, in my mind.
I'll be honest with you, not forget the fact that it's a Jaws sequel and a direct sequel at that. I think it is
Yeah,
one of the all-time great sequels. Yeah, and when you look at what was achieved, I mean, obviously we know Jaws movies are difficult to make anyway, just because of the water, let alone the mechanical shark and
for
everything else.
sure.
Throw into that no prep, script changes. Carl apparently was writing the script literally maybe a night or two before, so people were getting the scenes very late, and then they were obviously going out and shooting. Add into that all of the environmental elements, the weather, and everything else that's been going on. I mean, it sounds like a really challenging production. But obviously, the original Jaws was a very challenging production. How did Jaws and Jaws 2 compare in terms of overall experiences for you?
Well, as far as I was concerned, the chaos led to me getting a little bit bigger part all the time, because they'd shoot out all the locations. The shark didn't work. You couldn't shoot on the water. All right, we got to get a new scene. All right, let's let Hendricks be in it. And it was, I had no complaints. Movies are so hurry up and wait. And
Mm,
sometimes we'd be there for a week without working. And that was
yeah.
tough. I I,
And
I was never good in the down times.
what did you do with the downtime?
Well, we drank, and then hung out and went on excursions occasionally, but you had to stay near in case they needed you.
Mm,
You never knew, there could be a scene and we're going to shoot a quick one pager. You got to be around, you can't go far.
yeah,
We
sure.
watched a lot of television.
What was it like working with compared to Steven Spielberg? Do they have very different directing styles?
I don't know that they have very different directing styles. Jeannot, I think, he was so under the gun. He had so much to do. There was so much going on.
Mm,
And he had come in so late in the process, but they both knew what they wanted. I mean, he was not, Stephen was not a guy who said, oh, your motivation is to do this or anything like that. But he
mm,
knew what he wanted, and so did Jeannot. And I think they were contemporaries at one point, at Universal, in TV and other things.
mm.
But I got married at Jeannot's house. We became really lifelong friends, and I adored him. And then he brought me over to the UK, and we did Santa Claus the movie, where he met
Mm.
his wife, Cara, who I love. And he said, come on, Jeffrey, do you like her? I said, yes, very much. Good. He
I
married
marry
her.
her.
Yeah.
Good man. What about some of the other relationships that you had on the movie in terms of the friendships? Obviously,
Well,
you were
Gary
going back and
Springer is one of my dearest friends. And I don't know
mm.
if you know his story, but he's some spectacular guy.
Well, I'm hoping to speak to Gary
Oh,
soon because
yeah,
it
I
would be
hope you
great to have him
do.
as part of the series of interviews because I'm sure, like you say, he's got
Yes.
some fantastic stories.
I just saw
Yeah.
Gigi at a signing. We're great old friends, John Dukakis, and Carl Gottlieb. He and I just did a great seminar.
This seems to be sort of the Jaws legacy, doesn't it? People seem to form these lifelong friendships. But obviously, there are two people that you ended up working with on Jaws 2 who aren't sadly with us anymore. So, Murray Hamilton and Roy Scheider. Obviously, Murray was on the movie for a very, very short period of time, from what we understand, because obviously his wife was quite sick at the time. But what was it like seeing Murray again and working with him and
Oh, I
seeing him
loved Murray.
reprise the
Murray,
mayor?
Murray and I, we used to share a dressing room, and he'd always keep a bottle of gin in my boot. He was the best. And I just adored him. The whole story, walking home and go and Jaws 1 and go, here, kitty, here, kitty.
Yeah.
Shoo, he stunk. And he wouldn't go to his room. We had to leave him on the couch in the lobby of the hotel.
And what about the lobster claw? Billy told us a funny story about the lobster claw and Murray. Do you remember that at all?
No, I don't remember that. I remember he
So
drank gin and milk on that show.
apparently Murray had a lobster claw up his jacket sleeve. So whenever anyone used to shake hands
Oh,
with him,
I
he used
do
to have.
remember that. I
Do you remember
do.
that?
Now I do it. He used to joke with people constantly. He was
Yeah.
and what an actor. I mean, we
Oh,
all used to sit in awe and talk about The Hustler and Mr. Robinson and all of the roles that he played that were Anatomy of a Murder he was in.
yeah.
Great, great stuff.
He's so good. And you know what? One of my frustrations, and I'm going to ask you now about this, but you might be able to shed some light on it, is there's a scene in Jaws 2 that's deleted where they're all in the mayor's office. So Mrs. Taft and a few others, and they're deciding whether to fire Chief Brody. And they all take a vote, and everybody except the mayor votes to fire Brody. So the mayor backs up Brody and says, I don't want him fired. But they cut that scene out. And for me, that was the ultimate redemption of Mayor Vaughan from the first movie, because obviously, he made a lot of mistakes in the first movie.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that scene, or am I speaking
No,
to
I
the wrong
don't.
person?
That I
Okay.
don't.
We'll ask about that. He may be able to shed some light on
Yeah,
that.
he would know.
And what about Roy? Because obviously this was a very different experience for Roy from what we've
Well,
heard.
Roy didn't want to be there. They made him contractually have to do this, and I don't think he was very happy. But he was a pro, I'll tell you that. But Roy would sit out in the sun with one of those shields, the reflectors. He got so dark they had to color correct him in the final mix,
which I think is hilarious.
It's crazy. He was too dark. He didn't match to earlier in the movie, and it's all over the place. So
well, myself and Michael Smith, we recorded a Jaws 2 commentary, and we did tan watch just to see, could we tell if that
I get it.
it was
I get it, but it must have been like this,
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking at his tan, he's going up and down all the way through the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, what a nightmare.
Yeah.
Now, your character finally became chief of police in Jaws 2. What do you remember filming about that scene with Roy and Lorraine?
Oh, the very serious one, and where, I remember I was so glad to do it. And I thought, you know what? I didn't want to show any joy necessarily, because I liked him. He was a good guy, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And but I was thrilled. Chief, you're not going to be chief anymore, But
I love that. I just love that moment, and it's such a tender scene because you're feeling for everybody. You really
get
are.
it. It's beyond anybody. There was no bad guys in that, in that decision and that thing. And actors kill for moments like that. It was nice.
Well, this was the thing we were going to ask you next, actually, in terms of obviously your character Hendricks. He's now been made chief of police, and there's a bit when he's on the jetty, and you're just having to let Brody and well the Brodies go off in the police boat to pursue the kids and stuff. Do you wish that your character had maybe been involved in that part of the movie, so you got a bit of shark action and you were a bit more involved in the climax?
Absolutely. But wishes are wishes.
I would love to have seen Hendricks on the boat facing off against the
shark. Me too.
I think that would have been awesome. That's the Jaws 2 we really want.
I would have punched that Bruce.
Just knock him out. I love it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the lasting appeal of Deputy Hendricks? Because he's just loved by everybody.
I think that Hendricks is every man in many ways. He is all of us in the fabric of society who show up, do their job, are likable, and make a difference in people's lives in small ways every day. Those are everyday heroes to me. I know that I wasn't out killing sharks and doing things, but you know what? If I helped an old lady who had a problem with her picket fence or whatever, I was happy.
And when you first saw the final cut of Jaws 2, what did you think of it?
Oh, I liked it very much. We loved it. We used to go often to see it, but
Mm.
they rooted for the kids. You could hear them rooting for it in the audience sometimes.
Were there any deleted scenes featuring Deputy Hendricks that didn't make it into the final cut?
I don't think so. There may be snippets on the edge of the scene, but I don't think so. I think basically everything I did kind of made it into the movie. Do I wish
Uh,
there was more? Of course. But the one thing I've learned now is that this love of this movie, as is in horror movies, is passed down from parents to children and generation to generation.
yeah.
And it was so illuminating to a guy came in with a 4-year-old little boy. And I said, "Oh, he hasn't seen it yet." He goes, "Oh, no, he's seen it. He really likes it." I said, "I could call social services on you.
I saw
You let
Jaws
a
when I was about
4-year-old see this? None of us swam the same since."
I think I saw Jaws when I was about 4 or 5. I think that's when I
Oh,
first saw it on
Ross,
TV.
can
Yeah, yeah,
can
yeah.
you get your mom on the line,
But
please?
I'm fine. I turned out fine.
Yeah, sucking his thumb.
Not
Yeah,
obsessed
good.
at all.
Yeah, I
Um,
really.
Many people sort of look at Jaws 2 as almost like a slasher movie. Obviously, it's involving a lot of teenagers, and it's got sort of the scarred sort of villain sort of pursuing them relentlessly, and sort of picking them off or sort of one at a time. Do you see it that way, or do you see it as something else?
It's so interesting because Judy Pancoast on Twitter recently said something like, "Oh, it's not a horror movie, and you could tell by the score." And I wrote back and I said, I don't think it's a horror movie. I never thought of it as a horror movie,
Mm,
although in all of these conventions, it's linked in with the horror movies because there are scares in it. And
yeah.
there is some real deep horror scare with the idea of the ocean. It's this deep primordial ooze that we don't know anything about, and
Mm,
it's scary and it goes back in time. And what's down there? Who knows? And
yeah.
this really gave voice to it. Carl at a panel we did a few weeks ago said, when he was meeting with Steven, they talked and he said, "Listen, this should do for a shark and create that environment in the same way that the shower scene did in Psycho."
Yeah.
And it did.
It did. That opening scene with Chrissy at the
Yeah,
beginning of the original Jaws is
yeah,
always compared to the shower scene. So
yeah.
do you see Jaws, well, Jaws and Jaws 2, do you see them as horror movies then, or do you see them as something else?
No,
They
I
sort of
I
have their
don't. I
own.
see them as real great adventure dramas.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I think it's got
That
that
would
nice mix,
be
isn't it? I think
that
adventure
would be
drama.
my categorization.
So are you surprised that we're still sitting here talking about, or people in general are still sitting here talking about Jaws 2, Jaws 50 years,
The
45 years later?
the love of this movie is stunning. And the idea of how this movie affected our culture. I mean, I have a new granddaughter who lives in the UK, and I sing "Baby Shark," do 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 do, "Baby Shark" to her, and she knows it from the cartoons.
I think Jaws and Jaws 2 are two of those movies that are going to infiltrate the popular culture, and always be around and always have its impact. But obviously,
Hope
we're
so.
living in the age of the reboots and the remakes and prequels and everything else. If you were put in charge of the next Jaws movie, Jeffrey, what would be your 60-second Jaws movie pitch?
Well, I don't know that you can do the same story. It's got to involve a shark. I've been sent ideas about Amity. I think Amity, the town, might be really interesting with the
Mm,
characters. The somebody once said the country copulatives amongst them. There are all these kind of odd types, and that might be a lot of fun. And there are a lot of stories. The Amity PD with sharks, with crime, actually AI might be a great subject matter to deal with a shark in this venue. I was blessed to be in this movie. It changed my life. But you know what, Ross? I have a 908 and I gotta go. Thank you. 908. Yeah, I'm coming.
Okay, guys. Well, when you've got a 908 and you got to go, you got to go. I've been Ross for the Daily Jaws. Thank you so much for tuning in. And do be sure to check out the rest of the interviews for the Jaws 2 45th anniversary. As always, I'll drink to your legs and farewell and adieu. If you love Jaws, sharks, and shark movies, then please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and also visit our website, thedailyjaws.com, for all the latest Jaws news and stories.